Chadstone Shopping Centre buzzed with the usual Saturday chaos. Families, teens, couples, all lost in the hum of consumer life. The air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and the distant echo of laughter, punctuated by the constant shuffle of feet and the occasional cry of a child. It was a place where time seemed to blur and the outside world faded away, replaced by the relentless rhythm of retail. Sarah, a graphic designer, wove through the crowd, her mind heavy with stress and her patience fraying as she searched for a dress. She had a big event that evening, and nothing seemed to fit, literally or figuratively. Every rack she rifled through only added to her anxiety, and the noise around her felt like it was closing in. Her phone buzzed with unanswered messages, reminders of deadlines and obligations waiting outside these walls. Jessica, a personal trainer, simmered with frustration after a string of bad luck, her mood darkening as she waited in a long return line. She'd already dealt with a cancelled class, a lost wallet, and now, a return that seemed to take forever. Each minute in line felt like an hour, and the chatter around her only made her more irritable. She clenched her jaw, replaying the morning's mishaps in her mind, wishing she could just escape. Both women, strangers, carried invisible burdens, their tempers stretched thin by the relentless noise and pressure of the day. Around them, the mall's energy was a mix of excitement and exhaustion, with everyone seemingly on edge. The stress was palpable, hanging in the air like static, ready to spark at any moment. Neither Sarah nor Jessica knew how close they were to reaching their breaking point. Unbeknownst to them, their paths were about to cross, setting the stage for an eruption no one could have predicted. In a place built for connection, it was tension that would bring them together, if only for a moment that would change everything. It happened in a blink. Sarah, distracted by her phone, bumped into Jessica. Jessica's phone hit the floor, the screen shattering. That was the last straw. "Watch where you're going!" Jessica snapped, her anger spilling over. Sarah's own irritation flared. "Excuse me, you bumped into me!" The argument escalated, voices rising, each woman projecting her day's frustrations onto the other. Passers-by slowed, sensing drama. The air crackled with tension as insults flew. In that moment, their anger found a target, and neither was backing down. The insults grew sharper, each word a jab at raw nerves. "Maybe if you weren't glued to your phone," Jessica sneered. "Maybe if you had manners," Sarah shot back, stepping closer. A crowd gathered, phones ready, as the confrontation teetered on the edge. Jessica's shame and fury boiled over, her rational mind drowned by rage. When Sarah scoffed and turned away, Jessica snapped, lunging forward, all restraint gone. The argument had crossed a line. Words gave way to action. The point of no return had arrived. Jessica's hand shot out, fingers tangling in Sarah's ponytail, yanking with a force that was both shocking and raw. In that instant, all the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted into violence. Rage, once hidden behind tight smiles and polite words, was now made physical, unmistakable and impossible to ignore. Sarah's latte arced through the air, splattering across the pavement as startled onlookers gasped in disbelief. The crowd's shock was palpable, their faces frozen in a mixture of horror and fascination. Sarah clutched her head, pain flashing across her features, her dignity slipping away with every second. Humiliation burned in Sarah's cheeks, but fury surged even stronger. With a cry, she retaliated, her own hands finding Jessica's hair, pulling back with equal ferocity. The confrontation escalated, emotions boiling over as the two women became locked in a battle neither had truly wanted, but neither could now escape. They were no longer just two women on a city street. They were adversaries, locked in a wild, primal struggle. All sense of reason vanished, replaced by instinct and adrenaline. The world around them faded, leaving only the raw, desperate conflict between them. Shouts and grunts filled the air, drowning out the city's usual noise. Words were useless now, only the sounds of struggle and pain remained. They pulled, twisted, and fought, oblivious to the gathering crowd and the chaos they were creating. Bags, purses, and personal belongings scattered across the ground, trampled and forgotten in the frenzy. In that moment, their identities, carefully constructed and maintained, were lost, replaced by the raw reality of the fight. The fight was ugly, desperate, and undeniably real. There was no hiding, no pretending. Anger was unleashed for all to see, raw and unfiltered, a spectacle that drew every eye. The fury that had simmered beneath the surface all day had finally exploded, leaving both women changed, and the world around them forever marked by the violence of that moment. The crowd pressed in, phones aloft, faces lit by screens and shock. The fight became public spectacle, pain and rage broadcast for entertainment. Security scrambled, urgency finally cutting through the chaos. For a moment, the women broke apart, hair wild, faces flushed, but the fight reignited. They crashed to the floor, the crowd recoiling at the violence. Security guards muscled through, pulling them apart with effort. Panting and disheveled, Sarah and Jessica were finally separated, two defeated figures, surrounded by silent, judging eyes. As adrenaline faded, shame took its place. Sarah, held by security, saw her torn blouse, aching scalp, and the crowd's judgment. Jessica, scraped and shaken, stared at her broken phone, regret overwhelming her anger. Both women realized the fight had solved nothing, only deepened their misery. In a sterile security office, a police officer asked if they wanted to press charges. They shook their heads. Prolonging this humiliation was unthinkable. The fight hadn't fixed their problems. It had only exposed their pain. They sat in silence, remorse settling in. After the formal warning, a heavy silence settled over the room, thick with the weight of unspoken words and regret. Sarah finally broke the quiet, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with emotion. "I'm sorry. For everything." The apology hung in the air, raw and honest, as if she was letting go of a burden she'd carried for far too long. The tension between them was palpable, but beneath it, there was a glimmer of hope that things could change. Jessica nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with tears that threatened to spill over. "Me too," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "It wasn't about you. I just had a really bad day, and I took it out on you. I shouldn't have." The vulnerability in her words softened the space between them, making room for forgiveness. In that quiet moment, the anger that had once flared so brightly between them seemed to dissolve, replaced by a fragile but genuine understanding. They didn't need to say anything more. The silence now felt different, gentler, almost comforting. It was as if both women realized how close they'd come to losing something important over a misunderstanding. Eventually, they gathered their things and left the office separately, each woman lost in her own thoughts. Outside, the mall had already returned to its usual rhythm, shoppers moving about as if nothing had happened. The world kept turning, indifferent to the storm that had just passed inside those walls. But for Sarah and Jessica, everything felt different now. The confrontation had left a mark, a harsh lesson about the dangers of letting anger take control. They both knew that things couldn't simply go back to the way they were before. But maybe, just maybe, they could move forward with a little more understanding and care. Anger, they realized, is a signal, an alarm that something is wrong. But acting on it with violence or harsh words is always the wrong answer. It only leads to pain, regret, and broken trust. The real challenge is learning to pause, to breathe, and to respond with empathy instead of rage. That evening, both women made a quiet promise to themselves to find healthier ways to cope with stress, to never let their tempers get the best of them again. Whether it was through journaling, meditation, or simply taking a moment to step away, they knew they had to change. In the end, Sarah and Jessica discovered that true strength isn't about winning arguments or proving a point. It's about choosing peace, even when it's hard, and finding the courage to forgive, not just each other, but themselves as well.